No matter what business you're in, digital transformation never stops. At Verizon, we keep companies ready for what's next. We weave security into their business, virtualize their operations, and build AI customer experiences. We also keep them ready for the next big opportunity, like 5G. Almost all of the Fortune 500 partner with us. When it comes to digital transformation, we're here and we're ready.
Hello and welcome to Build Privacy into Your Products and Gaining User Trust. If you're joining us live, our speaker is in the Slido discussion answering your questions right now. For audio and video issues, please click the technical support button below. And I'd now like to turn it over to Sarah Gerber-O for the presentation.
Great, thank you so much for that introduction. So, as she mentioned, I'm here to talk to you about building privacy into your products and gaining your trust. While I don't have a disclaimer slide, I feel the need to at least speak to it. These are clearly my opinions, my observations, mostly my learnings and lessons, not those of my company or really even those of my team. Well, I think that we agree. This is really coming from my perspective. So as the agenda shows, what I want to talk to you about is some regulations, mainly the impetus for a lot of this, user trust, how we're defining it here so that we can solve it. Be framed the problem, or really how the problem was framed to us, our approach, what worked and what didn't, and then how you can take this home. Regulations are often seen as more of a problem than an opportunity. And so I'm here to talk to you about why this is more of an opportunity and why you can use this as an impetus to do lots of work that you've been meaning to do anyway. So in regulations, everyone has an approach. For us in the United States, it was really big when GDPR came out, Safe Harbor, all of the previous versions, because it was the first real big transformative version. HIPAA is clearly the outlier here. This is protected health information. This is a callback to the fact that I started out in hospitals, and it's a specific regulatory body with additional items. But really the idea is that all of these want to protect the user, the consumer, with their data, and they want to give more transparency. So really, I think everybody should kind of look at this as more of an opportunity to figure out how to really answer these, but also just do the internal work. Regulations usually kind of boil down into a few specific things. So some data types, there's usually data classification that people use. Sometimes they're using a framework. There are a bunch of well-known, NIST, ISO. You might have created one internally. I know I've tried, and it can be tricky. Maybe it's the critical security controls. So usually what it gets to is the sensitivity of the data. Is it about minors? Is it about health information? Is it specific to a home address, or is it an IP? Usually, along with the sensitivity, there's notification requirements, usually breach notification requirements. Most of us are terrified of those, but know very well. And then age restrictions, as I mentioned. Oftentimes, if children are young or if you have an educational product, you're very familiar with these. And these are more highly regulated than some of the other types of data. For user rights, really what most of these regulations have gotten to is the idea that users have rights with their data. And we didn't normally think about it that way. But really, they should be able to access things. They should be able to change preferences. They should be able to delete things. Portability, not on here, but super important. If they ask, they should be able to receive all of their data in a machine-readable format. What does that look like? And then marketing. Do they want to receive marketing? Maybe not. And while that goes a little bit with preferences, I think it has big implications for how we run our products. Now, how we're framing user trust here is a little bit more like product transparency, or really data collection transparency. So what do users want? They clearly want the service you're offering, right? That's why they're there. They also want to understand what the cost is. I think for a very long time, people just signed anything, clicked anything. And then people started to realize, oh, we should read into these. We should understand what those look like. So now people generally are aware of the fact that there's a cost for something. Whether it's data that you're handing over, whether it's collection of things, whether it's marketing, whatever it looks like. So they are a little bit more skeptical of free services. Now, we can dig into open source, but really this is mainly for paid services or services that collect data. So usually they want to know how to stop or start the service and then what's being collected. And you need to be pretty clear about this, because users, while they don't necessarily maybe understand cookies and how those things work, they do understand that it is transaction, right? They're getting a service for something. And so what does it look like? Why is it so hard to communicate about data? I think usually our users don't always have the best background or the most technical experience. Now, sometimes they do, which can be great, can also be hard because then that opens up other conversations. But really, when we think back to most of our products and services, we were just building them to work and to do something. Now we kind of have to go through into the how and the why of how we put all this infrastructure together, how it actually looks at the data. Does it look at the data? Is it ephemeral? So the data collection, I broke down to a few basics like cookies and user agents and authentication. Locations, where do you keep it? Databases, do you have connectors between databases and analytics platforms? Is it just hanging out in an S3 bucket somewhere? And raw logs, you need to be very sensitive to things that could contain more data than you anticipate. Raw logs are usually a big source of that. And then data access, how is it managed, right? This can be both parts. This could be a person with a credit card who signs a click-through agreement that now suddenly you have a third-party application that you weren't necessarily expecting. Or it can just be how the internal systems are managed, like through SSO. But it's important to understand what that looks like, both the onboarding and the offboarding of vendors. So how do we accomplish user trust? Really, the idea is articulate. We all have TOS, or terms of service. We have privacy policies. We have cookie tables. We've got tons of information that we're required to put out to users. Really, it's also our job to make sure the users understand what we're saying. We have to take it out of legalese. We have to take it out of here we're meeting these regulations, the company heretofore, all of that, and make it pretty basic so that anyone can kind of understand what's happening. The reason is if you give them a little bit more data or a little bit more information about it, they can make a judgment call. And what you want them to do is to be able to make the judgment call because then they have buy-in. They go, oh no, I understand what you want. I'm happy to give that to you for this service. You also want to verify that it's accurate and updated regularly. This is sometimes a hard and a gotcha. Articulating what you do can be hard. I know lots of us do lots of really good work. And then when we have an audit or a regulation, we have to go in and document it. That can be tricky. But even more so to verify that it's accurate. Sometimes we'll make statements and we're like, have we checked into that? We said 90 days. Show me the process for that. What does that really look like? And so it's important to just do the homework and verify, right? Trust but verify and iterate. It's important to always kind of know where you're going. So typically people have policy refreshes once per year, maybe a cookie policy refresh. You kind of look and see what's still accurate, but try to figure out what's next and what's coming so you can plan for it ahead of time. So then you're not signing yourself up and your engineers up for a whole bunch of work right at the end of the year. So really it's speak plainly, make sure you're speaking plainly, truthfully, and then figure out what your next steps are so that you can plan for it ahead of time. For us, framing the problem, we were given a challenge, and I think it was a reasonable challenge, but really this meant that we need to engage with a lot of stakeholders to figure out how to do this. Really, we were given the problem of what data do we collect, where's it stored, where's it being sent to, who has access, and really why are we collecting that specific data point? A very wise counselor that I work with in the legal team, he talked about data like collection is really an analogy for pollution, right? We made great steps in the Industrial Revolution here in the United States and several other countries as well. But as we did that, we created all sorts of back-end problems for ourselves, right? We were polluting into the rivers that we were drinking out of. We were ruining sewage sections. So it's like, as we made lots of progress, we then had lots of cleanup that we had to do. And I think data collection could be thought of in the same way. Right? Initially, a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, really it was collect everything. We'll find a use for it later. Then all you're worried about is managing it. We have to make sure we have access, that we know what we're doing. We don't really even worry about retention policies. Now we have to. Data is, quite frankly, a liability. We have to understand how it's managed, who's got access to it, why we even need it, and how long we need it for. And so while these questions seem pretty simple, I think for most of us, it's sometimes hard to answer them specifically. Especially when you're a young company, and so you haven't, rolled out RBAC in specific ways, or maybe you don't do audits in the same ways. And so, how do we format this? And so, I think that was really the challenge that we were given. But we saw it as an opportunity. Our approach to this: don't do it alone, really, and don't do it in a vacuum, because the whole goal of this is not for you to understand every product end to end. It's a good outcome. for you to understand, especially if you're like me and you're on the security team. It means it makes your job easier should you have an incident or you need to evaluate specific third parties or architectural design issues. But really, you need buy-in, and it should hopefully be top-down. Your leadership should hopefully help frame this for you in those kinds of questions that are very leading, like where is our data and who has access to it? Because then everybody has an antenna for it. And when you're in a meeting and you talk about data, people will bring it up. Or you can bring it up, but at least it's familiar to them. This is not a new idea. And the teams that you should probably get help from are legal, policy, product, engineering. If you're not doing this for a product necessarily, you can do this for other teams like HR and finance certainly have very sensitive information. So you could also do it in that way. But you want to make sure that you get a lot of buy-in from these teams, that you create a whole other team so that you can do it better. This is why we created a trust team. So the idea behind trust team is that trust is the kind of partnership between legal and policy and security, how we keep trust, right? And because user trust is really at the end of the day what we're after. So it's a shared responsibility. Everyone on the team is held accountable to its success. So from the data validators, right, maybe the engineers who are populating your authentication system data points, documenting what your data flow diagrams look like, what the access table should be, who the vendors are. And then should you choose to take it to a formal level, you can also do certifying. So you want to make sure that you certify things. There are people's names on this, people understand, more visibility. Branding, because I work in Silicon Valley. It's fun to always have a new team. It means more swag. It means shirts. It means a specific function where you now are not just part of security in your own little security bubble. You're part of the trust team, right? It means you have friends on lots of sides, and you automatically walk into meetings with people going, yeah, you're the trust team. We should work with you. One other piece of this that I think is very important is shared planning and alignment. So everybody needs to make sure that we have the same priorities in order, right? So when you are working with a lot of different teams, you want to make sure that you're very clear about timelines. You don't want to say, hey, H1 will do this, H2 will do that. And you also have to be honest about competing priorities and projects, right? So security, we do penetration tests, we do assessments, we do code-based reviews. We have lots of stuff that we just have built into our cycle. Legal's got policy refreshes and lots of things that they work on. So you need to make sure that you align the timing so that you can really work on this cohesively together. It's good to have shared goals that have visibility, such as OKRs, which is what we do, or objective key results. And it means that both people are kind of like on the hook to find a result, right? So that's really the best method. Now, how we started to break down all of these kind of nebulous concepts was we grabbed a Google Sheet. You can use an Excel sheet. You can use anything. Very analog, I know. But the idea was, let's grab pieces of data that we know are in the product, and let's start to kind of quantify them. How much is there? Where is it? What are we using it for? How long is it supposed to be there? So, and this is just a quick example, like a user agent, not necessarily identifying, especially if you're just looking at OS or browser. You can use this for debugging. It can actually be very important, and I guarantee your teams are going to want to keep that. But then who has access to this? What does it look like? What systems does it go through? Does it go directly from the product to a backend storage? Does it go to analytics tables? Where does it go? So it's really important to just kind of pick some classifications and start to go down through the process. So here's an example of kind of our sheet. And I'll be very clear, this is not super technical. The idea behind this is it should be readable to anyone. And so you kind of pick an area of the product, something that's easy. You can start easy, right? So sign-in page. The data point that we're talking about here is email. So maybe we use email instead of username or as the username. The user provides this, so that's how it's collected, and storage or retention. So we have it in our authorization system, an authentication system. So maybe we do a third party. We're like, nope, we're not rolling our own crypto. We don't particularly like open source. We're going to have this third party. Excellent. Okay, they can manage it for us. It's what they do. How long do you have to keep this data point? Well, considering it's a sign-in, you want to keep it for the length of the account. So that can feel uncomfortably long, but when you look at it practically, you need this to sign into the product. So however long you have the account is how long you need this. And then the data classification, I left this pretty intentionally vague, but inherently identifiable, right? An email usually, I think we've kind of gone past the days of like rainbow unicorn 536 into more things that are identifiable. First name, last name. First initial, last name, things that make more sense. And so it really is identifiable. Now you can add to this. This is a very simple table, and you can really expand, I think. We also did a policy exercise where we talked about where in our terms of service and our privacy policy these things showed up, so that we could also make sure that we were verifying as we went along and that it was articulated properly. You can add regulation pieces into this. You can pull in more retention. So if it's in an authentication system, but you've got backup stored somewhere, so you're looking at your disaster recovery, your BCP, your business continuity planning. If you have these in other places, this is a really good place to articulate it. So this is an extremely simple data flow diagram, but just to give you an idea, this is really helpful for framing all of those data points in your table, because you want to understand how it's flowing through your systems. Now, for me, this was great because it helped me understand how things were flowing through a system that was pre-legacy, and where things were, right? So I want to know where crown jewels are. I want to know where passwords are stored. I want to know where, like, whatever it is that your crown jewels is, full text articles. And so for me, this meant in the middle of an incident response, I'm not trying to call up people who know. I'm looking at the documentation that we created. I understand. As we want to make changes to the product, we can see exactly how it's going to flow, what it's going to do. Is it going to use the same connector as another? Is, in this example, like, is it going to an S3 bucket or a cluster or a database? This could just as easily be Google and GCP. So you can kind of change that around, but really the idea is that you understand how data is flowing through your system, where it stays. Another important point, ephemeral. So like caching, I would still count that. I think it's important to count that, because when I think about it from an IR lens, I think about where is the data. And if there's identifiable data, even though it's cached and only there for like 24 hours, still a point that I would worry about, right? It's still something that I would worry about if somebody had access to that they shouldn't. Feel free also to ask questions on that part. I know there's a lot of information, and so I'm happy to dig into more of it or talk to you a little bit more about the examples that we used. So getting into the lessons and the learnings, this is really like what's hard and what works, right? Anytime you have a beta or a pilot project, it can be tricky. And so I'm happy to talk to you about what worked for us. Time. This took a lot of time, right? So as you think back to all the stakeholder management pieces, you gotta get everybody on the same page, you have the buy-in, you wanna make sure you've got shared goals and OKRs. Really, there was a data migration that took place during this. So, suddenly I'm renaming some databases, same data points, lucky. But you really have to pay attention. You have to keep it up to date. The longer it takes, the more you have to update and iterate. There's churn, right? Sometimes employees come and go. Sometimes they just create their own startups. There's all sorts of things that they can do. So then you sometimes lose these like knowledge keepers of how systems work. Scope also can differ to different stakeholders. I think because I sit on the security side, mainly with engineers, we're kind of a little bit more relaxed. We realize this is not a box checking exercise. This is an exercise to really dig into our data, but we're also not making it super formal, right? Our thought behind it is like, we should know all of this. Let's make sure we know it at each level, right? Let's maybe have validators who are engineers who actually use the product. And then maybe we'll have the engineering managers who know. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, why is that over there? Because they know their teams really well. And then maybe the directors above them. Well, the directors are going to know less, right? Because they're not typically hands-on in the systems. So maybe they'll only notice outliers. So if you show them kind of that data classification table with the accompanying kind of evidence and retention policies, they might be like, that's weird. Why do we keep that so long? And then we can walk through it and talk through it. Same with the data flow diagram. But you have to realize the more people you want on this, the more friendly you have to make it in terms of usability. So it becomes less technical, right? And it also, you need to understand the formality that you're going into. So legal wanted it to be a little bit more formal, which makes sense. They write legal documents. They write very formal documents all the time. We were like, we just want people to agree. So you have to find a good balance. And you have to make sure that you compromise and support everybody's motivation, because everybody's on this team believes in this project for a reason, and usually something that they're going to take out of it, right? I keep mentioning IR. Incident response is, I think, something that goes through all of our minds as security professionals. So everything kind of boils down to, in the middle of the night, do I have the tools I need? Like with logging and monitoring and all of those alerting, but also just like, can I pull out and understand what's happening? Also, everybody's got a different interpretation of what personal data is, or consumer information, or user data. Oftentimes it's the first thing that they Googled, and so it might not be accurate, or it might come from a previous job or previous experience, previous industry, right? I came from hospitals. I think about protected health information. So it's important to also, when you start this, have a data classification that you're working from with really good examples so that you can talk through it and let people ask questions. That way they really understand, and they're going to develop this kind of internal antenna for what the levels are that you're looking for. It also means that they'll correct things that are wrong. The glory of this is, quite frankly, cleanup. I think everybody agrees the legacy systems need to be cleaned up. You need to sunset things naturally. You need to get rid of lots of stuff as you iterate, right? You spun up a server, great. A little dev work, awesome. What if it's internet facing? Like, what if you left a port open? You need to clean up as you go. And so I think while everybody agrees this is really important, same with like the data that we're talking about now, sometimes it's hard to carve out time to do it. And so the nice part about this is people naturally just started cleaning up stuff. Mainly because they didn't want to waste time documenting it. They didn't want to waste time drawing it on a data flow diagram. They didn't want to have to speak to all the pieces, especially if it wasn't in use and hadn't been for years. So I was super excited to see messages fly back and forth going, hey, can we just get rid of this? There's no reason for it. There's no reason for it over here in our database where we store everything. Like, let's just get rid of all traces of it. So that was really awesome to see, is the fact that this also spurred other work. And different teams, sometimes teams on products are very siloed. So maybe the front end and the back end are pretty siloed, and maybe there's like some research in UXR. This required everybody to get into a room and talk directly. So maybe they're using a specific third-party vendor for like some logging, or maybe, yeah, let's go with logging. And one team is not using anything identifiable, but another team is. If you only talk to that first team, you wouldn't actually know the depth of the data that's collected or where it is. So it's really important that you talk to all these kind of data validators or these knowledge keepers of the systems to understand how they're really used in each part of the application architecture. Documentation, this is great for onboarding. This is great for incidents. This is just good in general. Now you have really good documentation. You can onboard your engineers much easier. You can find ways that you can fix things much easier. You can find redundancy in your architecture that you maybe didn't intend for. So it's been, honestly, like, I would say the learnings that came out of this were so worth the time and the effort, because everybody walked out of it really knowing everything, really understanding how the architecture worked. And while there was some churn and you bring people up to date, people had a real understanding of what was happening, and we're doing a lot of cleanup and making sure that things were exactly the way they needed to. And coming out of it, asking questions now. Hey, we want to add this third-party vendor. We want to collect this data, and we think we need it for this long. Questions they wouldn't have normally thought to ask. And so that was really wonderful. So this is the section about how you can apply it. So if we were to phrase this as they have before, like next week, 3 months, 6 months, really you should ask questions. This has to be important within your org, or at least within a group of people who can help spur it, right? So that kind of top-down piece we talked about. You want to make sure that it's something that's valuable. I would probably pick a really sensitive area, or maybe one that's not, for a pilot, like depending on your ease, right? Figure out what works for you. Make lots of friends. As security professionals, we should hopefully be very good friends with legal, engineering, product, and policy, but if we're not, go make them. Go talk to them. Make sure that people understand what it is that you're trying to achieve, what this looks like, and what the ask is. Apply it. So, within the first 3 months, right, it might take you a while to get some steam. You might have to put this on a specific goal or OKR to get lots of buy-in, but grab a pilot, grab an Excel or Google sheet or just a piece of paper and just start documenting, right? Log on to the product or the system, figure out what pieces are there, you're a developer and see what cookies you're collecting, and then start identifying those product side or engineering side people who can both validate your initial findings and then add. Because really, once again, you're not doing this in a vacuum. This is not an exercise for you to understand the product. This is an exercise for everyone to understand what cohesively we do for data collection, where it is, and what kind of methodologies we're using, right? Sometimes they're not in alignment with what we think we are. And so it's real important to do that. And it's real important for the product side to fill out their side and the engineering side to fill out their side so that we can then look at it all together and know that it's accurate data. And then also identify third-party vendors. We have lots of them. Everybody likes tools, especially in security. Tools are helpful, they're great. They can be tricky, but they're really good. And then the first 6 months, maybe identify those third-party vendors that contain user information, and then look at the sensitivity, right? You've got that data classification that you're looking at. And partner with the engineering teams to draw those data flow diagrams. Begin to document how access to each system works, right? Is it MFA, SSO, SSH? Are people just going in through Bastion host? It's good to understand, and maybe that's perfectly fine, but it's important to understand what it looks like so that when you have it all in one chart, you can quantify, here's some outliers, right? Why are we accessing some systems this way? Why is it not centrally managed? What can we do about this? And then begin to document what roles and people have access along with that. Sometimes they're thought about separately. I think it's important to also notice the outliers of roles. If you have a specific, like maybe PMs are a role, but you really only have one person who does it, then I would probably just name that one person rather than all PMs have access to it, because you're seeing an outlier. Now within this, what you're doing is you're basically being able to answer those questions we talked about in the beginning. Where is our data? We can now list the systems. We know how it's collected, whether it's the user or a cookie or how it's being generated. We know the retention for it. How long are we keeping it? We know who has access to it. We know what systems it lives in. This is how you begin to really understand all of your data, all of your systems, and what it looks like. And this is a great opportunity to really dig in and understand. It will take time, and it will have painful conversations. Like, I think everything that you do that's worth doing is not always an easy job. But hopefully you find a place in your company, in your products, in your teams to really dig down into this information. Please feel free to submit questions if you have questions. I had a wonderful time talking to you about this. You can tell it's a passion project of mine. I really appreciate data transparency, user transparency. I think we should have really good communication and also relationships with our users, because we want them to stay around, and that means we need to treat them with respect. Does mean that sometimes hard conversations have to be had internally, but I think it's worth the work. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Yeah, thank you so much for attending. I appreciate the time.